Mr. Speaker, and I rise, of course, to support the motion before us here today and welcome this debate, which has been a very, very good and informative debate. There's been a lot of gems come out of the discussion so far, and I welcome that. It was Edmund Burke who said the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And peace and contentment is not a default position. It has to be worked at. Edmund Burke also taught that history is not simply a forgotten past, but it is an active inheritance. The cultural genome of a people, forged in response to the agencies of the past, remains intimately present in the DNA of a society. Society connects the visible and the invisible world. And I think through my lifetime, Mr. Speaker, the one thing that scares me most, I think, is the fact that understanding of history can be very shallow. It can be very... People's mindsets, and I include myself in this, can be ignorant of history and the facts of history. And that scares me, Mr. Speaker, and it scares me because even in our living history, even in the history of our generation, there are people who attempt to rewrite history, to change fact, to alter truth. And it shouldn't really be tolerated. And it frightens me. I've had the privilege, Mr. Speaker, of visiting the concentration camps and the death camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau. And it rocks you to the core. If you go there with a mindset of understanding and learning, it will rock you to your core. It hits you like a ton of bricks when you come to the realisation that mankind can be so evil. And that is more the default position than peace and tranquility and comfort. And so it needs to be constantly worked at. And it's just not the evils inflicted on the Jewish community. It's of all races and peoples who have been tortured and even despised throughout the ages, the Jewish community being one of those. But if you treat one bad, you treat us all bad. And really, surely that is the mantra that should be known for the worldwide efforts that we need to commit to in eradicating all injustices throughout this world. But of course, we should start in our own home place. We should start with our own self. And that's very important to do so. But what strikes me about this debate is this. When victims tell you about their lived experience, how they feel intimidated, discriminated against, excluded, undermined, victimised, but it seems you don't listen to one of those victim groups with regards to the definition of how they feel, of their lived experience, then there's something fundamentally wrong with that. We should listen to all victims who have been wronged in this lifetime and in history. And the definition of how they have lived their life should be the definition that we look to in order to try and define what wrong is. And that's why it's very important, with so many people defining their lived experience with what we have in this amendment, in this motion. And it pains me that this cannot obtain support right across this House, because I think that in itself sends a message. I think if we don't recognise the definition that most Jewish people put down, then that in itself could be construed as anti-Semitic itself. And that's a harsh thing to say, Mr. Speaker, but I think that it's true. Who would ever deem or think about telling some other race or colour or creed that their definition, how they live their life and their experiences of discrimination, how they define that is wrong? It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be tolerated. So why should it be tolerated with the Jewish community? I think it's wrong. I've been to these death camps. I've seen what evil can do. And we need to recognise it. We need to recognise it in our own community, in our own country, in our own self. And try and do something about it, Mr. Speaker. And that's where we'll start, and that's where we will succeed
Time's up.
in trying to do something about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I call Liz Kimmins.